Good morning. Thank you, Pris. We're delighted today to have Alderman Smith joining us. One of the things for our goal today is to get to know the alderman and the 43rd Ward. The City Government Committee has prepared 10 questions, and these questions have already been sent out to the alderman. We're going to do our best to get to all the questions, but we may not have time for some of them. So with that, I'm happy to get started and ask the alderman to tell us more about the 43rd Ward, its neighborhoods and its boundaries. Alderman.
Well, thank you, Rochelle. And I'm really honored that I'm helping to kick off this series of interviews with the League of Women Voters. I think that your job is more important than ever. And I was really appreciative of the comments that Priscilla made at the outset. This is an extraordinary time, and our country is very divided. And one of the key issues I'll just say that we'll talk about is redistricting. I have experience with that. I'm happy to share it. And it actually, it was because of a redistricting fight that I led in 2011 that the ward looks as rectangular shaped as it does. It looked very different. So I'll be happy to go into that, but I'll just tell you that the 43rd Ward encompasses the communities that many of you may know of Lincoln Park and part of the Gold Coast. To give you an idea of the size of it, it's only 2 miles wide and a mile and a half north and south, and there are 58,000 people living there. So in that section that is below Lincoln Park of the Gold Coast, which looks like a sliver, has 10,000 people living there. So it is a very interesting experience to be in city government, where one ward, to give you a sense, has the same population as the entire city of Santa Fe, or bigger than Springfield. And so it is a very interesting dynamic that I think always is important when you think about city government. We really, sometimes aldermen are called little mayors. Well, it's because we're really trying to take care of 58,000 people, about 58,000 people. The wards vary. There's from 56 to 58,000 people. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with Lincoln Park. I think I recognized a couple constituents here on the call. We're very blessed. The 43rd Ward has the highest per capita income of any ward in the city, even though the range of incomes in our city ranges from people who are living in CHA housing, which we have CHA housing here, and we also have a lot of senior assisted living, senior houses here, and DePaul college students, all the way up to several billionaires who live in our neighborhood, including the governor, his sister, several other Pritzkers, and a lot of other very, very wealthy people. So it is a very wealthy neighborhood, but it is not entirely a wealthy neighborhood. We have 5 public schools, which are very popular. We have one of the best public high schools in the city, the most diverse, the leading IB program. And we are blessed with having the second largest collection of cultural attractions in the city of Chicago outside of downtown. You all know Lincoln Park Zoo and the History Museum, but it's also the home of Steppenwolf Theater, Victory Gardens Theater, not Red Orchid, several other theaters, many live performance venues, from Kingston Mines, if any of you went to watch blues when you were younger, Kingston Mines and blues and jazz clubs and small performance venues. So as some of you know, many people, I moved to Lincoln Park in 1979 after I graduated from law school and started working downtown, because then, as now, it's a generally safe neighborhood for young single women to go and live. In fact, from a family perspective, we're a very unusual neighborhood. We are an unusual neighborhood in that, even given what I told you, 60% of the people who live in my ward rent, and they're young still to this day, young single professionals who take the 22 bus or the L from Fullerton or from Armitage or from North Avenue to go downtown and work. We've also, however, over time, things have changed. There was a period of time, and many of you may know about this, when as soon as kids entered kindergarten, families would move to the suburbs. And that had started to change until COVID. COVID is a real setback for that. And that helped turn our neighborhood into one in which people decided to stay in the neighborhood like I did and raise my daughter here and decided to really make it our home forever. So I've lived here well over 40 years. I have a grandchild now, and we really are committed to community. So that's just a taste of Lincoln Park, and we love it, and we're very proud of it.
Thank you. Just to follow up a little bit, I think Lincoln Park is known as mostly residential. Could you talk a little bit about commercial or industrial development that may be happening there?
Well, thanks for asking. We are largely residential. The 43rd Ward is largely residential. So my ward ends kind of at Racine. It goes in and out a little bit of the edges there, but basically at Racine. So we have a few commercial shopping streets, Clark Street, Lincoln Avenue, and the Armitage Halsted Historic District, which is a boutique district, which is now the leading place in the Midwest, believe it or not, for e-commerce. So if you buy something online and you'd like to see the store, you come to Armitage and Halsted and you'll see a store for that. So we actually are largely overwhelmingly residential, except for our commerce is DePaul University, which has 10,000 students in and around the area. So DePaul University is entirely, the North Campus is entirely within my ward. And the other thing is that for years, it was the home of Children's Memorial Hospital. It employed 4,000 people. It really was the anchor, commercial anchor. When Children's moved downtown, it created a huge void in commercial activity. And so we had a development effort to bring what is now called Lincoln Common, to bring some more people and businesses to the area, largely shopping. So that's really the commercial activity. Our commercial activity is culture and dining and music and theater and the zoo. And those are all, in addition to being cultural attractors, they're really important economic engines. Now, to the west of us, for those of you who are as old timers as I, there's a street called Clybourne. It's not my ward. Clybourne, Elston, those streets used to be completely industrial or like car shop oriented. And over the past 30 years, of course, they have been transformed into the second largest shopping district in the city after Michigan Avenue. And then again, much more towards residential. And some of you may have heard of the Lincoln Yards development, which is an attempt to turn the area around the Chicago River into high-rise development, like a second downtown. We can talk about that.
Oh, thank you. Let's talk about a couple of the issues that are important to the residents. What would you say some of those might be?
Well, you know, our residents are really involved in the future of the city. And we're very concerned right now. I think people are concerned about the insecurities of the moment, and that's primarily crime, public safety, the impact of COVID on their livelihoods and their city and their investments and things like that. And I think right now that is the number one concern. We and the rest of America have been through an absolute wrenching year. I'm very concerned about school starting. I wanted to start already. I think that the lack of school starting has led to crime, frankly, by teenagers who are not in the circumstances of people from Lincoln Park. So right now, I think public safety, because you have heard that crime has rebounded in many areas, including ours, is the really number one issue, followed by COVID, and then of course city finances, which of course really suffered tremendously as a result of COVID. Just when you have an economy that is based on tourism and there's no tourism, that's hundreds of millions of dollars to our city budget, which is really important to have.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a little more personal question. Tell us about when you first joined the city council and what was your background before joining?
Sure. So I first was elected in 2011 after my first run in 2007, which I lost by 600 votes. So I'm a lawyer. I went to the U of C Law School. Fortunately, there were a lot of people who paved the way for me to be able to go to law school, to be able to have women go to law school. My class was about a third women now. Now it's about 50%. And that was that was already in the big, almost second wave of women being able to do that. The people who were there about 10 years earlier were really the people who paved the way. So I went to law school, I clerked for a federal judge, and then I was very lucky. I got a job in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I was a federal prosecutor for 9 years for guys named Dan Webb and Tony Valukas, if you remember those names. And it was a real honor to serve for them. Now, interestingly, I didn't really realize it at the time. Of course, these were during Republican administrations, but the U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago already by then had the unmatched reputation for integrity, no politics, and just go get the job done. So it was a wonderful job as a young lawyer. I got married, I got pregnant, and after 9 years in the U.S. Attorney's Office, I had a 1-year-old, and I said I couldn't continue to work 7 days a week, which is what I was doing. So I left, and then I became a corporate lawyer for 16 years for an old company called Navistar, formerly known as International Harvester Company, if you know who they are. And International Harvester became Navistar, and the entire time I was there, they were in all kinds of trouble, financial trouble, legal trouble. It was really something. It was a really eye-opening experience. And I was there for 16 years, and then I left, and I obviously had a pretty almost grown daughter by that point, and I really wanted to go back to public service. And I thought about nonprofit work, and the story is while I was volunteering with some people at Fourth Presbyterian Church to help at the soup kitchen one day, we were all just chatting, and a woman there who I really didn't know very well said, Michele, you're a lawyer, you've done all this stuff, you ought to run for alderman. We don't like our alderman. I mean, that's really how it started. That's how it started. I went, really? I mean, I had been involved in student politics in college, which many people who get involved in politics actually do. But I never took it that seriously. I mean, I took it very seriously when I was 18 years old, but I didn't, but I really never thought I'd have the opportunity to run for office. And I thought about it, and here I was at kind of at a decision point in my life. And I thought, I wonder if I could do it. So I got together with some friends and got introduced to people, and I ran. And I really, it was a very tough race, and I lost. And I sort of did other things for the next couple of years. I ran for Democratic committeeman 2 years later, and I won to kind of help get me involved. And then I ran again in 2011 and won by 200 votes. So I've been in some very, very close races, very, very bruising races. But I always felt that I was living up to what I thought we need to do that was best for the people. And that's how I got involved. So many women get involved in politics really because their friends encourage them.
So
so I want to continue to encourage people. Mhm.
is Alderman your full-time job, or do you have any other kind of employment?
It is my full-time job.
That's wonderful. I'm going to
People
go on
work.
to the,
I have to say, there are people who have other jobs, and I have very mixed feelings. I have mixed feelings about it because other jobs sometimes give you perspective. Personally, I work a jillion hours a week, especially during the pandemic. I just was working 100% of the time during the worst part of the pandemic. So I got pretty freaking tired, excuse me for saying that, exhausted, like so many people have during the pandemic. But
I'm going to turn now to some of your work on the council.
mhm.
Tell us about the different committees you are, and are you the chairman or vice chairman of any of the committees?
When I was in the prior administration, I was just a member of a bunch of committees, but fortunately, in the Lightfoot administration, I was very proud to be appointed the city's first ever chair of the Ethics and Government Oversight Committee. We never had a committee like that before. And one of the reasons I ran, and one of the issues that are important to me, is government transparency and reform. And so even in the prior administration, I was really involved in leading reform efforts to try to get the city council more power over the city budget, and also to give our inspector general real power to investigate everybody who needs investigating, including city council. So I was really thrilled that Mayor Lightfoot, of course, had that point of view as well. And they've established this committee. So I'm now chair of the Ethics and Government Oversight Committee, and it's been a real honor. It's been I think we're making a difference, and we're just getting going.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the Ethics Committee? How long have you been meeting there?
So it was formed for the first time in 2019. And I was there with Mayor Lightfoot on her first day in office when she signed an executive order to try to revamp this thing called aldermanic prerogative, which is somewhat misunderstood, but to try to revamp it. I supported everything that she did. We then, we meet not quite once a month. We have meetings that are briefings for aldermen almost every month. So what we do is we have rewritten the ethics code in Chicago to prohibit lobbying of one elected official serving in a private capacity to another elected official. And you know from reading the news that the business of elected officials benefiting for their personal businesses has been a really big deal in the entire state of Illinois. And right now we have a sitting alderman, Ed Burke, under indictment for essentially using his power in that fashion, both to get tax breaks and essentially holding up businesses. So we prohibited it, and we are leading the state right now, which is a hard thing to say in Chicago, that Chicago now has the strongest code on lobbying of any part of the state of Illinois. And we're really proud of that. The other thing we do is we're beginning to have oversight hearings now. You know, those of you, and I know you were all up on things like Congress, there have been famous hearings over time of oversight. It's the Congressional Oversight Committee that gets to the bottom of things. There's no history of that in Chicago at all, and we're trying to build it. So we've had a couple areas that have really angered a lot of aldermen from an operation standpoint are the operation of our juvenile justice system. So I had the first oversight hearing ever in city council about juvenile justice, and we're chipping away at trying to continue. It's a very long-term project to try to fix that. And then we also we're going to have a hearing on the recycling program, which is a mess. And then whenever the inspector general does a report, it actually comes to my committee and we hold briefings to explain to people exactly what is going on. And sometimes we have a hearing and sometimes we don't. So those are the kinds of things that we've been working on.
So you mentioned aldermanic prerogative. We're wondering how you feel about maybe a city department handling some of the small items like permits, awnings, things, permissions for the public way, as long as you were informed about them.
Yeah, I support that in general. I do. I will share a little secret of being an alderman. That is a wrinkle on this. The truth is, my staff and I actually serve as eyes and ears for the city of Chicago. And by that, I mean, if you think about it, there are not and will never be enough city employees to literally find out whether a loading zone is in a safe place. Never. That would involve, as a city, the city's really big from a landmass area, and they just can't, they just don't have the staff. So aldermanic staff actually serve as a kind of a first line of staffing for the city departments to do their work. And that's why I would not want a system in which the aldermen don't have any say. It's not like a small city, you know. If you think about the towns in which you live, if you live in one of those towns, you know, you can jump in your car if you're a staff person and you could probably find your stuff. Here, you know, if you think about the 42nd Ward, which has 30,000 businesses itself, for example, not like my ward, the city doesn't have enough staff. So we do serve, aldermen serve an actual sort of staff function, even though it's not, of being able to say, you know, if you put that there, you're going to cause a problem because you know that there's a problem. From all kinds of variety, pedestrian safety or trucks or things like that. So it's really, we actually serve a very important role. The problem with aldermanic prerogative is when that input is used for either political or personal gain. And that's the problem. So several of the things as a result of the aldermanic prerogative study that the mayor did do have resulted in really changes kind of just the way we're talking about right now. And I'm hoping that we can get to the point where some stuff just doesn't have to go to city council committees anymore, because that just adds time and waste of time to it. So that's a long answer to your question, but I know the explanation is probably pretty helpful.
Well, I have seen in watching the council is actually voting on putting up awnings and putting up loading zones, and it's part of the entire city council committee.
Right. It doesn't have to be. That does not have to be, so long as the city can do its job. And the city can't do its job without the aldermanic staff, not so much the alderman, the aldermanic staff being able to review things. And this happens in our office every single day. And we spend a lot, but it certainly does not need to go to city council to be approved. It should be an administrative kind of thing. And I really support that. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Yeah, we don't need, 300 signs being approved. It's handled pretty quickly, but honestly, you could do it on, we're moving to an online system this year, I understand it, but what would be required to actually just take it out of city council's hands is a whole bunch of different kind of laws. So it's, I'm in support of them though.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you now about the operation of the city council. How do you think it's working? Do you think there are changes that should be made in the operation of the council and the information that you're getting?
So I don't like our budget process, even with good people in office. I don't like our budget process. We're not sophisticated enough. There are a lot of other cities that do it differently. And so I think over time, I still would like to change our budget process to make it, I hate to say this, a little longer, but more transparent and more robust from I guess, auditing ways, I would put it, to know really what money is going for. We have an $8 billion budget. And it's really, it's hard to have oversight of that budget under the way that we do things. So, yes.
Are you getting monthly or quarterly reports about the operation of the city? Or can improvements be made there?
Yes, yes to both. There are yes to both. Yes, but improvements could be made. Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to skip over to go back to something that you mentioned at the beginning, and that is the mapping of the wards. You know, of course, we'll be having a new census coming out fairly soon, and this alderman will be redoing the ward boundary maps. And the League of Women Voters has long wanted to have a commission to draw these boundaries. And we're wondering, what is your opinion about having a commission do the boundaries rather than the alderman?
I completely support that the map be drawn by an independent commission, and I'll tell you why. And it's ironic because some people say Chicago's a one-party town, and we can't draw our own map. I think the fact that we're a kind of a one-party town, and we still have these problems, gets to the real basic issues with redistricting, is that it's often personal. In other words, an alderman wants to pick his or her voters, and they want to draw out the people who they don't like to make it easier to be reelected. And that's a basic political ill. And as far as the country's concerned, we are now experiencing the outcome of redistricting fraud and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but the reason that we have the alt-right and the alt-left and everything that we're complaining about is honestly because districts are drawn in a way to completely isolate voters and to keep out voters who disagree with those isolated areas. And that means that parties tend to move to the extremes. Whereas if you just drew the boundaries of where people lived, people would have to compromise some more. In our case, in Chicago, the bad outcomes of redistricting is that communities don't get good representation. And I give you a live example. When I first became alderman, I was the new girl on the block. And I say girl very deliberately. And redistricting came up. And some of my neighbors, who are now my friends, decided that they really would rather have part of their ward instead of their ward. And they took Lincoln Park and divided it into 5 separate wards. And we all lost our minds, but didn't know what to do. So we actually organized and won. And that's a very long story, which I'm happy to share, but you probably don't want to hear. But we won. And what I fundamentally believe about districts is it should allow communities to have a voice. So Englewood is divided, I think, into 4 districts. The back of the yards neighborhood is divided into 5. How can anybody if you want to improve your school and you are advocating and you have to knock on the door of 5 different aldermen who frankly don't care about you because you represent 2% of their voters, you're never going to get your school help. And what we did in Lincoln Park was to make sure that Lincoln Park as a whole had a voice. Now, the 60614 zip code, which is Lincoln Park, is too big for one ward. Maybe we should have fewer aldermen. That's a debate worth having. But I will say this right now, those neighborhoods, there are neighborhoods all over the city who don't have a voice because they have been selected out. And I think a commission would look at neighborhoods first, because that's what you're supposed to do. And then, of course, you have to respect the Constitution to make sure that that every voter has a voice, because that was the other way redistricting was done, to exclude communities of color, or the Chinese community. So they didn't have a voice because they were spread out among wards.
So even though you're supporting the commission, are there certain elements that need to be considered, either ethnic or community basis, that need to be incorporated when doing the ward boundaries by commission?
Yeah, I think it really is just what I talked about. First, you start with the communities. The real, Chicago supposedly has 77 community areas. That's a little out of date, but not much. If you live in Beverly, the people in Beverly should have should kind of have a ward. The people in Lincoln Park should have a ward. The people in the Gold Coast should have a ward. And then you have to worry about making sure the population is fair, because some places are bigger than others. So yes, it can't guarantee that every place has its own representation because of one man, one vote. The wards have to be population okay. And then you have to worry that when you do that, have you now disenfranchised people? And that does lead to sometimes ward boundaries that look a little funny, but that's okay. That's a far cry from where we are now, in which people are really just picking their voters or trying to not have to have those people. I don't want to have those people because it's a pain in the butt to have those people. It's kind of how, I shouldn't be saying that on a recorded Zoom call that people are paid, but that is what happens. So,
so you mentioned that you had a long struggle to redo the 43rd ward the last time. Was that for the 2010 census that occurred?
Yes, wards are last, just so you know. They do the congressional seats, then they'll do the county stuff, then they'll do the state reps. And after that is when, even though theoretically we're supposed to start in March, we're really the last, generally among the last people to get redistricted, because it just takes that long for it all to filter down. So yes.
Thank you. I'm going to ask now about what we call ranked choice voting. And that is, the way we have it now is in our February election, if someone does not get the majority, the top two vote getters go to a runoff in April. So would you be supporting more of a ranked choice voting approach for voting for mayor and alderman?
Yes.
Where people select and rank their choices?
Yes, I do. Oh gosh. Yes. But yes.
It gets tiring to have an election in February and go right again into April.
Yes. God knows what the result would have been for the mayoral race. I don't know actually what would have happened. So maybe that's a case study to think about. But yes, I'm certainly in favor for aldermen. There are very few times when that result has been different. I think a study could be done to show there's really no difference. In fact, requiring to win by 50% plus one was not the law in Illinois until after Harold Washington won as mayor. So I'm in favor of getting rid of it. You can win the presidency with less than a majority vote. You can't win as mayor of Chicago, and you can't win as an alderman. And that was directly put into office because Harold Washington won in a three-way vote. I'm sorry to tell you that history, but that is absolutely 100% history book what happened. It was a racist attempt to make sure that Harold Washington couldn't happen again. And the only reason that an African-American person won this time is because so many people ran that the accident of voter turnout and how that was done won. I don't know if it could have happened any other way. So I'm glad, but we should not have. The biggest rule change that we can get in Springfield would be to get rid of the 50% plus one thing. It's just, and ranked voting, that's the other solution.
Do you think it would increase voter turnout?
Ranked voting? Yeah, maybe. I know that, interestingly, now I'm just talking about my ward, but in 2015, when Rahm got put in a runoff, for the first time, more people came out for the runoff than the initial election. Because, but yes, it would. It would. And really, it's another good question, why the heck we have elections in February. Maybe we should have them all in April if we continue to have these municipal election cycles. But we have a lot of elections in Illinois.
We certainly do. A lot of posts to elect for.
Right.
So I want to ask you about some of your initiatives. If the league would be wanting to support some of your initiatives, what would you suggest?
Well, I haven't talked about an issue that I don't know if it's a league initiative or not. But one thing that I'm trying to do for the people of the city, to keep people in the city, is to increase the amount of park and open space in our city. And really, the number one issue for me and for many of my constituents is to try to turn part of the property near the Chicago River into a major public park. Now, park advocacy is something that's very close to my heart as a young environmentalist. And I think if COVID taught us anything, it's the importance of public space. Public space is part of the backbone of the city. Almost every major park in the city was developed at a time, if you can remember, if you can think about those times, when people worked in factories that were unhealthy, or they sometimes lived in unhealthy environments because of coal, and there's no pollution control. And the great thinkers of the day realized that people, for their health and for their mental stability, needed open space. And that is really what led to Washington Park and Grant Park and Lincoln Park and Garfield Park. All the great parks were designed because people need space to breathe. And when my ward is so dense, people live in high rises, they have no place to go. When they shut down the lakefront trail, we cut off the lifeblood of tens of thousands of people. So I've been leading a fight for several years to establish a new 20-acre park on the banks of the Chicago River. We have a lot of support for it, and it's going to be very expensive. And it's something that is a legacy for the entire city that we're fighting for. I do think if that's something that Lee gets involved in, I would love your support. With regard to other things, of course, I think there are two things that come up now. One, of course, is redistricting, but the other is education. I think that the League of Women Voters could play a really important part in bringing and re-educating masses of people in Chicago, the suburbs, and everywhere about what it means to be an American citizen. The kinds of things that happened, that crystallized really on Wednesday, really showed that people honestly don't understand it. And I hear this, I don't know if there may be people here who may not understand it, I don't know. But, I took a very strong stand against what happened at the Capitol on Wednesday. And I got back some responses that to me showed a really lack of understanding of what government was. And I'm not really even blaming people. People want to believe what their leaders tell them and what is on television. We want to believe those things. We've always believed in what the press tells us. And we're now learning that that has not been the case for a bunch of years here. And I think the League of Women Voters could play a really key role in helping to make people understand it with history and understanding the consequences of this kind of thing. I'm a little bit fearful right now of what could happen, and in the country, with everyone so hard, with so many people so heavily armed. And I could run on about my feelings about the Second Amendment, but right now, I think that that is as important as redistricting. I mean, redistricting is a nationwide cancer, but so is this. So those are two issues that I hope you do get involved in.
Thank you. The educating citizens and voters has long been the primary mission of the League of Women Voters.
Yes.
And we will have to keep up with that and redouble all our efforts.
And anything you guys want to do in my neighborhood, I will gladly have you come. It's fantastic. I know the league ran one of my debates, at least one, in one of my, I've run 11 times now, if you count each, in 9 years because of runoffs. So there are debates at every single point along the way. I've been involved in a pile of debates and happy to do it. And the league has run those and always did them well. And I think you've become as relevant as ever and even more relevant in this day and age. So thank you for what you do. And I hope that you expand your efforts.
Thank you. We're coming to our last question, and this is, in a way, this is a little bit related to what you were just talking about. But what are several things that you would like to get done, or at least started, during the remainder of your term, which ends in 2023?
Yes. Well, I did mention right now, I really want to get the city to purchase some land for this park. It's a long and arduous effort. And that is really my number one priority, because when the land is gone in the hands of a private developer, it is gone forever. So that really is an item that I have strong support in the ward, and we really got to get done. But it's not the kind of thing that you can have a rally for every day, so to speak. The other thing is that I'm, as I mentioned, the things that we're doing with ethics and government oversight is really the goals that I have for the rest of my term. We need to do something about juvenile justice to stop young people from committing the kind of crimes that they're committing, like carjacking. And on the one hand, there are consequences in our system. It's very bad. There aren't consequences right now. Our system has changed. But on the other hand, why the heck is this happening? And we need to do things at both ends of that equation in order to stop to have people have a path to a positive life instead of a negative life. Those are really my top. Those are some of my top priorities for right now.
Alderman Smith, thank you so much for joining us today. We've really learned so much about you and the 43rd Ward. It's been so informative. And we're very happy you were able to join us. And
thank you.
Again, I'll just remind you that the link for this program will be available shortly, and we'll be sending it to you when it's available. Also, we have a second part of our program, which is going to talk more in detail about the City Council. So you're definitely welcome to stay for that, but we understand if you have some other commitment. So again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks
Chris,
so much.
I'll return it back to you. Thank
Let me
you,
just say,
Alderman.
All right, thank you. And if anyone has any follow-up, feel free to contact me, my staff at yourvoice@ward43.org is the email for our office, yourvoice@ward43.org. And we would be delighted to hear from you and help in any way we can. Thank you so much for doing this. Good day.
Thank you.